Welcome to the Daily Tanya. Today is Sunday, the 16th day of Adar Aleph, the first Adar. Let's begin with tzedakah. Gedoylo tzedakah, shemakareves es al geula. Tzedakah brings Mashiach closer. And today we begin chapter 30 in the Tanya. And in this chapter, the Alter Rebbe continues to give us golden advice, how to refine ourselves, to better ourselves, to become better people. So it is a continuation in a way what we discussed last chapter. Last chapter was a very harsh one in a sense. Alter Rebbe was talking about a situation that is not an easy situation when a person who is doing everything good, the Beinani, is going by the book, doing everything right, but yet sometimes he feels numbness, spiritual numbness. He's not feeling anything. And Alter Rebbe discussed a few methods how to deal with this. Basically, the idea is to crush our ego. And we mentioned last week every time that this is something that you have to be careful how to do this, because you don't want to get yourself into depression, into sadness, and that's not a good place to be. You want to be happy. You want to do things in a happy mode. But sometimes you need to have this specific treatment to break out of this numbness, of this apathy. And so we discussed it last week, how to think about how low the ego is, that the animal soul, animalistic soul, the fact that it has ability to desire non-godly things, that itself gets the person to think how low of yourself, of your animalistic soul, which is the soul that we identify with. And in a few advices, a few points we spoke about. We spoke about to revisit past sins, even though you're okay now, you still have to revisit and see how you can even perfect yourself even more, and so on and so forth. And finally, we spoke about how you should think about the dreams that you have. This also is an indicator how low the person is, because if you're in a good place during the day, then you would have holy dreams. If you don't, that means that you are not perfect during the day. And finally, we said about to scream and to ridicule the animal soul, and to talk from the depth of your heart, from the depth of your godly soul, and to basically to intimidate and to get angry at the animal soul. Say, how dare you separate me from the godly truth? So this was discussed last chapter. You can go back and listen to these classes. Now the Alter Rebbe moves on, and he says another thing, in addition to what we spoke until now, to humble oneself, is also there is a instruction of our sages that we should be humble. We should be humble in front of every human being. Now, what does that mean? When you're saying every human being, you have to be humble in front of every human being. Every person, you should be humble in front of them. It's not just acting humble. To really think that we are not better than them. Even though you can say that it's nice to say, it's easy to say, but if you see other people that you're certain that their behavior is much worse than yours, you're doing everything good, everything right, their behavior is certainly much worse than yours. How can you become humble in front of such people? And this is what Alter Rebbe is going to discuss now. And the good thing about this, that this is something it's not something that you have to use only in certain occasions, like the other things we discussed last chapter. This is something that you should really train to be a humble person. And that, when you become a humble person, it helps you and helps everyone, not judging people. And that is the point what Alter Rebbe is discussing about not judging. You don't know the circumstances, what the other person is. Before you judge him, before you pass judgment, think about it. Think about the challenges that that person might have that you have no idea. Maybe he's fighting the challenges more than you're fighting your own challenges, even though your challenges may be trivial, maybe small things, small infractions. But are you doing this fight that he's doing? So this is what Alter Rebbe is discussing here. Let's see inside, chapter 30 in the Tanya. Says the Alter Rebbe, Oid zeis yosim en libay, one who suffers from timtum alev, the numbness of the heart, the insensitivity, that the heart is not reacting, not feeling anything. So must also set his heart. L'kayim mama Rabbeinu zechonim levacha vevei shfal ruach b'fnei kol adam. To fulfill the instruction of our sages, be lowly of spirit before every man. Now, when we're saying be lowly of spirit, what does that mean? What does it mean to be humble? To be humble, you can, if you think, let's say, I'm great, I'm smart, you can be smart and be humble. Why? Because people who are not as smart doesn't mean you're better than them. God gave you a gift that you're smart. That I can understand. But to be lowly of spirit, meaning that I should really consider myself and think that I am lower than the other person, while in fact I see the other people are much worse than me, doing much worse things. How could you feel lower than them? So indeed, this is a statement in the Mishnah, and some of the commentators have a problem with understanding this, and they explain what that means is that you have to act, you have to treat them as if they're in a higher level than you. But Alter Rebbe doesn't accept that. Alter Rebbe says, what it says, vehevei, it means be lowly. It doesn't say act lowly. Be of lowly spirit. That's what Alter Rebbe says. Vehevei be'emes la'amita. The wording implies be thus, and not merely act thus. In all sincerity, it has to be truly so. Bifnei kol adam mamish. And we're talking about be lowly. It is not talking only about a certain group of people. Talking about you be lowly of spirit in front of every human being. Afilu bifnei kal shebekalim. In the presence of every man, even in the presence of the most religiously irreverent people, kal shebekalim, the lightest, the people of a very light-minded people in when it comes to observing anything. So that is the question. How could you be in that place? To be lowly of spirit in front of everyone. And Alter Rebbe explains that the way to do it is by following a different instruction of our sages that they say, do not judge your friend, your fellow person, until you stood in his place. And Alter Rebbe is going to explain that what does it mean until you stood in his place? You don't know the circumstances of what led that person to act the way he acts. So you cannot judge them. And it's going to explain in detail the circumstances means the physical place, physical circumstances, and it can also be his spiritual place. The kind of challenges that he has. Not everybody has the same type of challenges. This is what Alter Rebbe continues, V'hainu, al pi mayim harazal, al todin es chaveoch, ad shetagia lemkoyme. This can be accomplished by following the instruction of our sages. Judge not your fellow man until you have stood, meaning placed yourself in his place. For it is literally his place, meaning his physical environment, that causes him to sin. And he brings an example. If a person, his job is to be out there in the market and see all kind of sceneries, scenes that may tempt a person to sin. And that is a natural thing. It's a natural thing when the eye sees, the heart desires. Says Alter Rebbe, since his livelihood requires him to go about the marketplace all day. And whenever he's not thus engaged, he's of those who sit at the street corners. And thus his eyes see all sorts of temptations, and what the eyes see, the heart desires. That's a natural thing. Now, it is something that today we don't have to be in the marketplace to have the heart desires. We have all kind of devices at home that we have to be careful. So obviously that is something that we need to avoid as much as possible. But when you see a person acting in a certain way, you have to think, his situation is not like yours. He's in a place where he has temptations. Additionally, not only we're talking about the physical place, we can talk about the spiritual place. What does it mean? Some people have, by nature, a more passionate nature. Some people will see things which are, and they're right away tempted to do something. Other people they don't have that challenge. They don't have that nature. So as we said, additionally, he may be his spiritual place, the nature of his evil impulse that leads him to sin. His evil nature burns like a baker's fiery oven. What is a baker's fiery oven? It's much hotter than the oven in your home, which is heated with greater frequency and intensity than domestic oven. As it is written in Hosea, it burns like a flaming fire. It is different, however, with he who goes about but little in the marketplace, and most of the day he is at home, rather than at the street corners, and he therefore encounters less temptation. And even if a person does go in the market, not everybody has the same kind of yetzer hara, of evil inclination. Even if he does go about the marketplace all day, so that his physical place is the same as that of the Kal Shebekalim, that low life, as we call him. But it may be that his spiritual place is different in that he is not so passionate by nature, and is therefore not as greatly tempted by the sights of the marketplace. And he explains, because the evil impulse is not the same in everyone. One person's nature may be more passionate, and the others less so, as explained elsewhere. So this is the opening of this chapter 30 with Alter Rebbe. He gives us this amazing advice how to be humble. And that is obviously not easy to accomplish. It's not easy. Goes without saying. He was a chassid of the Alter Rebbe. His name was Rabbi Shmuel Eliyahu. He came from a city called Kalisk. And when he came to the Alter Rebbe and he asked him advice about certain things, and the Alter Rebbe told him that. He told him, Hevei shval ifnei kol adam be'emes la'amita. Be humble of spirit in front of everyone in truth. He says that chassid went back home. And he came again to visit the Alter Rebbe. He came to hear his teachings, his Torah, but he would not go in for Yechidus, the private audience again. For 20 years, he didn't go in to see the Rebbe again. 20 years. For these 20 years, he said to himself, I need to work on myself to accomplish, to achieve this level of feeling humble, feeling lower than other people, not to feel superior to other people. It took him 20 years to work on himself. And finally he achieved that. And he came in once again. So again, this is not something that is easily done, but this is something that we should at least try to work on ourselves, to be humble in front of people. And guess what? When you're judging people favorably, so many situations can be avoided. When you see somebody does something, you see a spouse, you see a child, you see a friend that does something, and you right away want to rush to judgment. But if you stop and say, wait a second, I don't know the circumstances. Maybe there's something else there. Am I better than him? No. So that is, in general, advice. And again, that's not something like we discussed in the last chapter, to feel crushed down, that you may lead to sadness. This is not something that leads to sadness. On the contrary, to be humble, yes, it helps you to break out of this spiritual numbness because you're going to feel lower than other people. But in the same time, it is something that constantly can be done. You can constantly work on this, and obviously the question is, what about the other people who are in a low place? Do they have an excuse because they are in those circumstances? That we'll discuss the Alter Rebbe tomorrow. We'll say, doesn't mean that gives them an excuse to do what they do. But we'll discuss tomorrow. B'ezrat Hashem. Have a wonderful day.